They say a cup of coffee can change your whole day, but no one ever said it could ruin your entire career. It was a Tuesday morning, cold, gray, and buzzing with that familiar Seattle energy. The scent of espresso and rain lingered in the air as professionals in tailored coats lined up at Sequoia Coffee Bar, half awake, fully stressed, eyes glued to their screens. She stood in line, silent, steady. Her name was Ava Jordan. Wearing navy slacks, a simple blouse, and the kind of worn black heels that spoke of long days and longer nights. She didn't look like much. Not today, at least. When her turn came, she ordered her usual double-shot latte with almond milk, no sugar. She reached into her purse, handed the barista a sleek, black card, and then heard the words that freeze time. Card declined. The barista's voice was sharp, impatient. People in line shifted uncomfortably. A few looked up. Most just went back to scrolling, thankful it wasn't them. Ava didn't flinch. She simply pulled out another card, declined again. Now there were whispers, a quiet chuckle from someone 2 spots behind her. Then came the voice that broke through the buzz, smooth, smug, and far too familiar. "Hey, barista, just put her coffee on my tab. It's just $6, I got it." Ava turned slowly. There he was. Bryce Thompson, navy suit, Rolex, smile like he practiced it in the mirror every morning. He didn't recognize her. Of course, he didn't. 6 months ago, he'd sat across from her in a boardroom and helped destroy her career, and now he was buying her coffee. Ava took the cup. Her fingers brushed the warm paper. Her lips curled into a soft, unreadable smile, because what Bryce didn't know was that in 47 minutes, he'd be sitting in a boardroom again, and this time, she'd be the one holding the clicker. 6 months ago, Ava Jordan wasn't standing in line for coffee. She was standing in front of a 12-person executive board, pitching a strategy that could have saved them all. At the time, she was Chief Innovation Officer at Cascadia Global, one of Seattle's fastest-growing logistics firms. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but her ideas, her numbers, spoke louder than any title ever could. That day, she'd walked into the boardroom with a 48-slide deck, not just pretty charts or buzzwords, a complete operational overhaul that would cut emissions by 40%, slash delivery costs by $18.2 million annually, and position Cascadia as the greenest logistics firm on the West Coast. She'd run the projections herself, triple-checked every line, every contingency was considered. It wasn't just a plan, it was a lifeline. But she never made it to slide 20. Because 10 minutes in, Bryce Thompson, Vice President of Operations, leaned back in his leather chair and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "It's ambitious, Ava, but maybe a little too idealistic. You know how these things play out in the real world." A few chuckles followed. Not because it was funny, but because Bryce was the kind of guy people laughed with even when it hurt. Ava kept presenting, unshaken. She spoke with the calm precision of a surgeon, each word a scalpel cutting through corporate ignorance. But it didn't matter. By the end, the room applauded politely. 2 weeks later, she was called into HR. They said the company was restructuring, that her position was being eliminated. But Ava wasn't naive. Not after spending 9 years helping that very company scale into 8 new markets. She knew what restructuring meant. It meant Bryce had taken her plan, renamed it the Thompson Initiative, and pitched it to the board as his own. It meant she was no longer a good fit, a term they loved using when someone asked too many smart questions. The headlines came fast. Cascadia unveils radical green strategy. VP Thompson leads industry disruption with visionary plan. Her name was nowhere. Not in the article, not in the press release, not even in the footnotes. And the industry followed suit. One by one, job offers dried up. People smiled, but doors didn't open. Ava had gone from rising star to too intense overnight. She moved out of her high-rise condo, sold her car, cut everything down to essentials. But she didn't break. She did what smart people do when the system kicks them down. She started taking notes on who said what, on how they said it, on who clapped and who didn't, and most importantly, on what she was going to do next. When Ava Jordan walked out of Cascadia Global's revolving glass doors for the last time, there were no handshakes, no farewell emails, no thank you for your years of service, just silence. And then, the whispers started. It began subtly, like a draft under a closed door. A recruiter who used to email her weekly suddenly ghosted her. A colleague from a partner firm unfollowed her on LinkedIn. An industry event where she was once a panelist no longer had room on the schedule. At first, she thought she was overthinking it. Maybe they were just busy. But then, at a networking brunch downtown, she overheard a junior exec say it plainly. Ava Jordan? Isn't she the one who got too aggressive with her ideas? I heard she clashed with upper management. Bit of a liability. She didn't turn around, didn't flinch, just sipped her mimosa and let the acid burn down her throat. But inside, it scorched. Bryce hadn't just stolen her strategy. He'd rewritten her entire reputation, quietly, efficiently, just like the way corporations erase mistakes they don't want to be held accountable for. And being a black woman in a space like that, it didn't take much to become the villain in other people's stories. They didn't say it outright. No one ever does. But the implication was always there. She was too confident, too passionate, too assertive. Words that men like Bryce wore like medals. Words that, when applied to women like Ava, became career poison. She tried applying for jobs, sent out resumes, made calls. Each time, she felt like she was being cross-examined, not for her skills, but for her temperament. One interviewer even said it to her face. "We're looking for someone who can collaborate, not dominate the room." Ava blinked slowly, smiled, and said nothing. But that night, she removed the Cascadia Global achievement from her resume. The same line that once got her in every door now kept her out. And it didn't stop there. An anonymous blog post surfaced titled, "The Real Story Behind Cascadia's Green Pivot." It called Ava a disgruntled former employee, claimed she had unrealistic expectations, and hinted that her plan had actually endangered the company's financial stability. No author name, no sources. Just enough innuendo to sow doubt in every room she hadn't entered yet. Friends stopped calling. A few colleagues said they didn't want to get involved. She became radioactive. In less than 3 months, Ava Jordan went from the sharpest mind in Seattle's logistics scene to a name people only spoke in hushed tones, if at all. And all it took was one man's ego. One man who didn't want to be outshined. One man who couldn't stand the idea that the best idea in the room didn't come from him. But here's what Bryce never understood. Ava didn't need anyone's spotlight. She was already on fire, and while he was busy trying to erase her from the narrative, she was already writing the next chapter. The world thought Ava Jordan disappeared. In truth, she was only getting quieter to become more dangerous. She left downtown Seattle, moved into a modest one-bedroom walk-up in Rainier Valley, traded business suits for sweaters and sneakers, kept her head down, paid in cash, went invisible. But Ava didn't go into hiding. She went into planning. Her apartment looked plain from the outside, but inside it was a war room. Post-it notes lined the wall, flowcharts, names, connections, timelines, corporate filings, screenshots of email chains, SEC disclosures. Every line was a breadcrumb leading back to one man, Bryce Thompson. She started small, quiet. She remembered every name of every colleague Bryce had dismissed with a smirk, ignored in meetings, or subtly pushed out for morale reasons. And she called them, not with bitterness, not with revenge, with vision. One of the first to answer was Luis Morales, former IT systems analyst quietly forced out under the pretext of restructuring. But Ava knew the truth. Luis had flagged several data vulnerabilities that would have exposed Cascadia's environmental fraud. His reward? A pink slip. Next came Kendra Hayes, a UX designer whose entire department was folded into brand just weeks after she questioned the lack of diversity in leadership. Kendra had style, strategy, and a long memory. Then Jonah Park, meticulous, brilliant, and twice passed over for promotion because he was too soft-spoken to lead. Jonah had laughed when Ava called. He said, "Took you long enough." Together they started something they named Horizon Foundry. No office, no website. Just a shared vision to build a consultancy firm that would do everything Cascadia claimed to do, but better, cleaner, and with integrity. At first, it was all whisper networks and burner phones. Ava reached out to former clients Cascadia had lost due to poor follow-through or bloated pricing. She pitched them tighter strategies, leaner operations, smarter logistics. Many of them didn't even know she was behind it. They just knew someone sharp was solving problems. And fast. And while Bryce bragged on LinkedIn about streamlining legacy systems, Ava was quietly stealing back his clients one by one. But it wasn't just business. It was justice. Ava also filed a Freedom of Information Act request to cross-check Cascadia's federal contracts with employee demographics. What she found? Inflated diversity numbers, contractors counted as full-time staff, cultural compliance reports, fabricated from internal templates Bryce had signed off on himself. Then came the biggest break. Amanda LeClaire, a junior executive assistant who had once admired Ava from afar, too afraid to speak up when the knives came out. But Amanda had seen everything. Emails, meeting memos, Slack messages. She reached out late one night with a simple message. "You were right. I have something you might want to see." Amanda delivered over 80 internal emails, including proof that Bryce had pitched Ava's green initiative as his own, right down to the color scheme. That was the moment Ava stopped surviving and started preparing for war. Not with anger, with spreadsheets, projections, screenshots, contracts, strategy decks. She knew Bryce, knew how he thought, knew he'd keep pretending until the walls collapsed around him, and even then, he'd blame the architecture. So Ava built something he couldn't see, a storm beneath his feet. And while he slept comfortably at night, still believing he'd handled the Ava problem, she was sitting beneath flickering lamplight, building the very thing that would undo him. Brick by brick. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, "Consulting opportunity, urgent." It was from Robert Gaines, interim COO of Cascadia Global. The message was polite, corporate, a little desperate. We're seeking outside consultation to support a critical restructuring initiative. We've heard strong things about your firm's performance and discretion. Please confirm your availability for an executive session this Friday at 3 p.m. The board will be present. Ava didn't smile. Not yet. But she did lean back in her chair, sip her tea, and reply in 6 words. We'll be there. Please prepare everything. Friday, 2:57 p.m. Columbia Tower, 53rd floor boardroom. The room smelled like polished wood and recycled ambition. Floor-to-ceiling glass, leather chairs, corporate artwork no one actually liked. Men in gray suits sipped cucumber water and stared at pie charts on tablets. Bryce Thompson, standing by the espresso machine, looked tired. They had lost $22 million in contracts in the last 10 weeks. And word on the street? Clients were leaving for a smaller, faster firm. He still didn't know the name. He just knew they were good. Too good. So, when Robert cleared his throat and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Ava Jordan, CEO of Horizon Foundry." Bryce actually laughed, until he turned around and saw her. Avenue-tailored black suit, hair braided back, eyes sharp as ever, unapologetically present. The room shifted. A few board members whispered. Bryce opened his mouth to speak, but Ava beat him to it. "Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the invitation. Let's begin." She didn't acknowledge Bryce, not with a nod, not even with a glance. She simply connected her laptop to the projector and clicked. Slide 1 appeared. Cascadia Global, 6 months from collapse. "Based on the data reviewed over the past quarter," Ava began, "your operational inefficiencies, client churn, and fraudulent reporting practices suggest this company has less than 6 months before complete insolvency." The room went silent. Someone dropped a pen. "That's a strong assumption," Bryce said, voice tight. Ava finally turned to him. "It's not an assumption. It's math." She clicked to slide 2, a graph of revenue drop versus client churn. Slide 3, an internal email dated 4 months earlier. Bryce writing, "The new consultants are killing us. They're smarter, hungrier, and worse. They know how we think." Ava clicked again. A recording began to play. Bryce's voice casual, arrogant. "We borrowed the green strategy from Ava." Whatever. She's not even in the industry anymore. The air left the room. Bryce's jaw clenched. "Where did you get that?" "Same place I got this," Ava said calmly, flipping to a spreadsheet labeled Inflated Compliance Reporting, EEOC Violations. Emails, performance reviews, hiring patterns, all lining up in damning rows. And then, the final slide. A side-by-side comparison. Ava's original sustainability proposal from 6 months ago and Cascadia's Thompson framework. Identical. Same structure, same projections, same layout. Bryce looked down. Ava looked up. "What's most tragic isn't that you stole from me, Bryce," she said, her voice steady. "It's that even after stealing brilliance, you still managed to fail." Silence. Then movement. Robert Gaines stood, cleared his throat again, only this time his face had changed. No more smiles. "Ms. Jordan, if you have a formal proposal for how to move forward, we'd like to see it." Ava handed over a thick folder. Bound, stamped, impeccably organized. "This includes a 3-phase recovery plan, contingent upon a full executive resignation and federal cooperation." Starting with Mr. Thompson. Everyone turned. Bryce's face flushed deep red. "You invited me here," Ava added quietly. "You asked for help. I came with solutions. But make no mistake, This is not a rescue. This is accountability. And then she smiled, not with cruelty, with clarity, because the boardroom she once left in shame now hung on her every word. The boardroom emptied slowly. No one looked Bryce in the eye. Some slipped out with their tablets. Others stood by the glass windows, pretending to check emails while quietly processing what just happened. Bryce Thompson sat frozen, his tie askew, face pale. He tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but there was nothing left to say, because the numbers were real, the recordings were real, the theft was real, and worst of all, everyone in that room now knew it. By Monday, the resignation was official. Mr. Bryce Thompson has stepped down from his position as Vice President of Operations at Cascadia Global, effective immediately. The press release was clean, sanitized, but the news cycle wasn't. Because the Seattle Tribune, Bloomberg, and Fast Company had already picked up the story. One journalist, present at the meeting, had streamed Ava's presentation live to a private tech blog. Within 48 hours, the video was everywhere. Clips of Ava's voice played on TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You didn't just steal my strategy, you proved that even brilliance in the wrong hands can still crash a company. Hashtags trended. The Ava Effect. Corporate Reckoning. Built, not borrowed investors pulled $120 million in funding from Cascadia within 1 week. The stock dipped 43%. 4 major clients terminated contracts, citing misrepresentation and internal instability. A government investigation followed. It turned out Ava's FOIA request had sparked a quiet federal audit months earlier. Now, with her team's data, the EEOC and FTC opened full inquiries into Cascadia's hiring practices and contract reporting. The board dissolved. 2 top executives resigned. A third tried to negotiate immunity in exchange for cooperation. But Ava, she didn't gloat. She didn't give interviews. Didn't accept a single podcast request. Didn't post any victory statements online. Instead, she returned to the Horizon Foundry office, a modern space in Seattle's Pioneer Square with exposed brick, plants in every corner, and a front desk run by interns from underrepresented tech programs. Her team had grown from 4 to 43. Every one of them brilliant. Every one of them once ignored by someone like Bryce. Now, they ran one of the fastest-scaling consultancies on the West Coast. Revenue doubled in 6 months. They turned away more clients than they accepted. And the best part? They didn't just fix broken companies. They built new ones, with values that didn't require polishing for the press. Ava stood at her office window one evening watching the skyline flicker. Somewhere out there, Bryce was probably refreshing his inbox. Rumor had it he applied for a business development role at a mid-sized logistics firm in Boise. Salary, $86,000. The same man who once made $400,000 a year. He didn't get the job. She'd heard through someone that his references weren't great. "You don't rise by tearing others down," Ava said quietly. "You rise by building something no one can take from you." She smiled, handing the new intern her company badge. "That's how you make sure they never write your story for you again." This wasn't revenge. It was a recalibration of power, of truth, of what happens when the underestimated decide they've had enough. Ava Jordan didn't scream. She didn't burn the building down. She outgrew it. And in doing so, she reminded the world of one brutal, brilliant fact. The most dangerous person in any boardroom is the one who was never supposed to be invited back. 18 months after the day her card was declined, Ava Jordan stood on the stage at the Women in Innovation Gala in San Francisco. Spotlights, applause, a standing ovation before she even opened her mouth. She wore the same watch she bought at a pawn shop when she was down to her last $300. Now, it glimmered under the lights like a trophy not of wealth, but of survival. She adjusted the microphone, took a quiet breath, and smiled. I've been asked how I found the strength to keep going after I lost everything. And the answer is simple. I never actually lost anything that mattered. I only lost what was never meant to stay. She paused, letting the room settle into the weight of her words. What they took from me, my job, my title, my reputation, wasn't proof of my weakness. It was proof that I was never supposed to belong to a system that feared what I represented. A woman who didn't apologize for knowing her worth. The crowd didn't move. It didn't need to. This wasn't a speech. It was a mirror, and everyone felt it. Later that night, alone in her office with city lights dancing across the windows, Ava reread an email from a young woman in Michigan. Miss Jordan, I watched your story. I'm 24. I got pushed out of a startup I helped build. They said I was too driven. I almost gave up. But then I heard you speak. And now, I'm starting again. Ava closed her laptop, eyes glassy but bright. That was the point. This story was never about revenge. It was about reclamation, of voice, of dignity, of narrative. Because when you've been underestimated, erased, or told to sit down quietly, you learn to build something that doesn't need their permission. You don't rise to prove them wrong. You rise because you finally stopped needing them to be right. So if you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told you were too much, remember Ava Jordan. Remember that power doesn't always come with a title, that sometimes the best thing they can do is underestimate you, because that's when you build in silence. And one day, you walk back into the very room they tried to keep you out of, not as a guest, not as a problem, but as the solution they didn't see coming. The best revenge isn't about destruction. It's building something they can't tear down. Have you ever been underestimated or had your ideas stolen, only to rise stronger than before? What would you do if you had the chance to walk back into the room that once pushed you out? Share your story below. Like, comment, and follow for more true power moves.